we're looking at another kind of late teen, mid-round pick for Seattle, which may not sound especially high to some teams. For John Schneider, that's a really solid position for him. When you look at this team, what did you identify, Jordan, as maybe their single greatest need?
Well, I think it has to be offensive line, especially the guard position. I think they need some significant upgrades in that area. And, one possibility could be shifting Abe Lucas inside their starting right tackle just because of the durability concerns that he has had, and then drafting somebody in this offensive tackle class. But if they want to keep him at that right tackle spot, I would like to see them upgrade at that guard spot, whether it's Tyler Booker out of Alabama. I think he would be a really good fit. Armand Mimbo out of Mizzou is another name that you'll probably see commonly projected to the Seahawks. And then also Jonas Savania out of Arizona is probably another name that you'll see as well.
You mentioned possibly moving Abe inside. I think we had a conversation about that, Stacy and I, yesterday. What about his game makes you think he'd be able to handle the guard position?
Well, I just think the physicality that he plays with, which is something that I always love to see in those guards. And then also there's just something about what I like to call having those bumpers on each shoulder, just so you have that security with the center and then also the tackle. But as a tackle, you're always out on the island at that right tackle spot over your right shoulder. So it is a little bit different when you have those bumpers over each shoulder at guard, and you can protect them a little bit more in those protections as opposed to being on an island at offensive tackle.
Hey, taking a step back, Jordan, and kind of looking at a couple classes at once here. One of the things that we've heard from analysts all year long when we've asked them about the Seahawks kind of struggles to build an offensive line is, oh, well, this is a league-wide problem. And for us, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. You watch the Eagles, you watch the Bills, and you go, well, looks pretty good over there. However, I believe them. I know that many teams struggle with this. When you look at these classes, and I know you've looked at so many, do you see like a dwindling supply of NFL talent at guard or at tackle? Do you see, a bigger gap? What do you think is happening?
Well, I don't know if it's a dwindling supply. I think there's always going to be offensive linemen in every class, and it's very rare that you see a lot of those guys go early in the first round. There isn't a Quentin Nelson or anybody like that in this draft class or even in previous years, just because those types of players are so rare. So there's a lot of development that has to happen with those centers and guards and also tackles as well. But I think the limited practice time has really hurt a lot of the development of these offensive linemen. And then if you think about a lot of the college systems that these players are playing in, it's a lot of up-tempo. How many plays can I really execute in as little amounts of time, just because these teams are running, 70, 80 plays a game sometimes. So a lot of these offensive linemen, they're not really asked to sustain at the point of attack a lot of times. And that's completely different in the NFL. It's all about your strength and your power and then just your balance that you play with. So I think it's more so of the lack of development time and then just the difference in the offenses from going from college to the NFL.
Hey, I'm going to shift the conversation over to the wideout position. A decision has to be made over here with DK. We've spoken to several draft guys, and they say, look, this wide receiver pool isn't as deep as it's been in the past few years. Do you think if the Hawks were to move DK, there is a type of receiver out there that could come here to Seattle and not be a DK but take that role?
Yeah, I mean, there's no DK Metcalf in his draft class, in my honest opinion, just because of how good he's been over the past few years or so. And, I would disagree a little bit about the wide receiver talent in this class. There's not that high-end talent that we've seen in years past, of where we've seen 4 or 5 guys go inside the top 20. But I think this is an overly deep wide receiver class. In day 2 and day 3, I think we're going to see a lot of guys go off of the board in that range. I don't think there's any top 5 or top 10 player in this class, in my opinion, unless you're counting Travis Hunter strictly as a wide receiver. And then, argument could be made about Teterow McMillan out of Arizona, who some people have as that marquee player. But outside of that, there's a lot of guys that are worthy of going in that mid to late first round range and even into day 2. And I'm looking at Luka Burden at Missouri, Emeka Ibuka at Ohio State, who's one of my overall favorite players in this class. And one player that's surging up boards right now is Matthew Golden out of Texas. So there isn't, from a stature and physical standpoint, that DK Metcalf type of receiver. But as far as just replacing his production and then the spots that he plays in the offense, I think there's plenty of guys that are capable of that.
I know that this isn't going to be relevant to Seattle just yet. We are going to have a quarterback conversation, and many people want them to find Geno's eventual replacement. Neither of those are going to be Cam Ward or Sheduer Sanders. They're just not going to have a shot at them. But I'm curious, Jordan, about your take on both of these guys. Just from a draft perspective, I'm curious what you see.
Yeah, so I have Kim Ward of Miami as my quarterback one. It's been that way for me really since September during the earlier parts of the season. And you just look at the body of work with Cam, and every stop that he's been at, he's been productive, whether it's in the FCS ranks with the Incarnate Word, Washington State when he was really productive there, and then most recently with Miami. Everywhere he's been, he's had a profound impact. Now, there are some things that he does need to clean up as far as just some of the reckless plays that he does have, and then just playing more in rhythm and on time and just taking what's available to him. Those are some of the things that are the next stage of his development. So I would like to see him improve there. But just from a physical standpoint, I think he has all the tools necessary to be a productive starter. And then Sheduer, very different stylistically, more of your own time in rhythm type of thrower, really polished passer from the pocket, not an overly nimble type of athlete, but he does have enough to get himself out of trouble. Now, he does take some bad sacks at times, so he does have to improve on that, just taking his check down here or there, but he's much more polished stylistically. He can play in any type of offense, preferably a West Coast winner where he can get the ball out on time, attacking the short to intermediate areas. But stylistically, both of these guys are very different. But I do have it Cam Ward, one Sheduer Sanders, too.
A conversation that we get from our listeners, or a statement, is like, hey, man, it's fine a quarterback late, and then you look at the playoffs now, you got everyone's a first rounder except for Jalen Hurts that are left in the playoffs. And I feel like they feel that way because of what happened with Russell Wilson. So what I've done is I try to go and look at some of these guys that might be later round picks. One of my favorites has been Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. Is there a guy that you feel like could be a later pick and be productive in the league?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think McCord is that one guy that I would have circled. And, he's been a revelation this year for Syracuse. He really had to reinvent himself after having a bit of an underwhelming season at Ohio State for their standards anyway. But you look at some of the throws that he's making on tape. I thought he played really well in every game outside of Pittsburgh, where he had that uncharacteristic 5-interception performance. But he's making some high-level throws. And, there's just something about being comfortable in the offense and just being relaxed in the pocket and just knowing where to go with the ball. And that's consistently what he was able to do this year. So I think he's one guy that could go maybe in the 4th or 5th round range. That's where I have him projected. It wouldn't surprise me if he does end up going higher than that. I think he's one player that's really going to help himself a lot, especially during this pre-draft process. And another name that's not really being talked about a lot that I will be willing to take a shot on in the later rounds is Max Brosmer out of Minnesota. And he has a bit of a crazy story. Was an FCS player for the first 4 years of his career, and then came to Minnesota, got off to a bit of a slow start, but really improved during the middle and then the back end of the season, this past season at Minnesota. And both of those guys will be at the Shrine Bowl here starting on Saturday, practice starting on Saturday. So I'm really interested to get eyes on both of them.
Tell me a bit more about Max. I actually don't know much about him at all. I mean, when you said someone I'm really excited about, no one's talking about, I was like, I'm going to know. But I clearly I didn't. Tell me a bit more about him and why you think he slipped under the radar.
Yeah, so he actually started the first few years of his career at New Hampshire, put up ridiculous numbers like over 10,000 passing yards, over 60 touchdowns during his career. And he had some injury mishaps during the first few years of his career, but really came on during the backstretch of the year. And Minnesota got him out of the portal. And, he was great this past season, over 2,500 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions, I believe. But you look at the tape, he isn't overly gifted from like a physical standpoint. Like he doesn't have a super strong arm, but he's one of those guys that plays on time. He's very decisive. He knows where to go with the football. His drops always marry up and match with the routes that they're trying to run, but he's extremely tough as well. And you look at those late round guys that have went on to succeed. He has a lot of those traits that align with that. So Max Brosmer of Minnesota is definitely one name that's not getting a lot of buzz right now, but I think he's going to get a lot more notoriety as we go through the process.
Man, when we look at the running spot, it's like Genty and everybody else. I had the privilege of covering some ACC games and fell in love with Hampton over there out of UNC. Are there any other running backs you feel like are going to be good at the next level?
Yeah, those two are actually my top two. So your eyes are not deceiving you at all when you're looking at both of those guys, Genty and Hampton. I think they're really good. But this is a phenomenal running back class. I think we could get over 30 drafted. Wow. And I think the last time that we saw that was 2017. There was 30 drafted in 2017. So this class could have as many as 30 or even more drafted. And, we saw two guys that I think very highly of in the national title game, and Quinshon Judkins, and then also Trevion Henderson, that dynamic duo at Ohio State. I think both of those guys are probably going to end up being 2nd or 3rd round picks. You look at Caleb Johnson of Iowa, who probably has a chance to go very early in day 2. Devin Neal out of Kansas is a really good player. DJ Giddens out of Kansas State is another really productive player as well. Trevor Etienne of Georgia is another player. I just reeled off about 8 or 9 names right there that possibly could go in the 3rd or 4th round as well. So this is a fantastic running back class.
Hey, one of the conversations that I think the sports world has been having with Jaden Daniels' season is like, oh man, why didn't we see this from Washington, or why didn't we see this kind of, floor for Jaden Daniels in his first season? And conversations like that always make me think about my own assumptions every single draft class and then kind of learning from those. Jordan, you are a draft expert, right? Like, this is your job to know everything and be fully prepared. But to a higher level, are there things that you kind of look back on maybe each year and go, oh, I learned something from an assumption in this class?
Well, it's a great question, just because it's no surprise to me that the 2 best rookie quarterbacks were Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. Both of those guys had over 55 career starts. And as a quarterback, being a former quarterback myself, there's no such thing as having too many reps in college. And you hear a lot of guys that are older, they're dinged for being older. I've never believed in that, just because there's never a such thing as having too many reps. Now, if a guy is 25, 26, 27 years old as a rookie, then yes, of course. But we're talking about both players that were 23 years old entering the process. Bo Nix had, I believe, 62 career starts. Jaden had over 55 in his career with Arizona State and LSU. So it's no surprise that the quarterbacks that had the most reps in college, they translated the quickest in the NFL. So that's something that I'm definitely going to take note of when I'm going through this process as well. Cam Ward, somebody that's had over 55 career starts. Quinn Ewers is another player that's also played a lot of football. Jackson Dart is another that's played a lot as well. So those players that have played a lot of football, it shouldn't come as a surprise when they translate so quickly in the NFL.
Hey, I wasn't surprised that Hunter got the Blitnikoff, but I had my eyes on Nick Nash, man. I felt like he didn't get the love he deserved because of the level of football he played at. Where do you project he goes, and what do you think his career looks like?
Yeah, he's a really interesting player, tall, long strider that has fantastic hands. He's somebody that put up ridiculous numbers as well. If I had to give a range for him right now, probably I would say early to mid day 3 right now. It'll be interesting to see what he does run at the combine. I think that's something that's going to be really important for him. But we know the stats are there. It's just a matter of what boxes does he check in the pre-draft process, as far as the speed, the athleticism, and then just the consistency in that area as well. I think that's something that I'm definitely going to be looking for from him.
All right, Jordan, tell us what you got coming up as we lead up to the draft here.
Yeah, so I'm taking off for the Shrine Bowl. Like I said earlier, practice will start on Saturday, and then I'm going straight to the Senior Bowl in Mobile. After that, practices start next Tuesday. So we're really going to start to see some of these prospects differentiate themselves. And as draft analysts, we have what I call clusters with prospects. So we're going to be looking very closely at these practices to see who's really standing out amongst the competition, no matter what level they played on during their career.
Anyone in particular you're excited to see in person? Maybe you haven't yet, or haven't to the extent you'd like?
I'm a former quarterback, so I always look forward to seeing these quarterbacks in person. So I'm going to get a chance. Sheduer is actually practicing at the Shrine Bowl, so I'm looking forward to seeing him up close. And then we get to see Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, and Riley Leonard all playing together at the Senior Bowl. So it'll be interesting to see who really comes out on top in that bunch.
Hey, Jordan, this kid ain't going to be there, but holla at my boy Efton Chisholm III out of Eastern Washington University, man. Love that dude.
I definitely will keep an eye on him.
Appreciate you, bro.
He is ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reid. Keep an eye out for his work, ESPN.com. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.